I'm not always Christian. When I break my leg, don't pray for me. Carry me to the hospital. When I am going through depression, I need therapy. So this is all of who I am. It's not just my spirituality. So it's not one or the other. It's both end.
Shouldn't then Africans portray God the way they see themselves? Would that also be wrong?
So we have that. We have that. Those are the voices that the latest voices in Africa that are trying to Africanize God, which is wrong, because then we are only committing the same crime that the Europeans have committed.
Should we then keep him European?
No, he's not European. Neither is he African.
Pastor Tapiwa Mutseriwa. Did I say it correctly?
That's correct. You said it like a Shona from Murambinda.
Is it the Karanga people?
Karanga people. That's where I hail from. I'm more Emanyika. I think you're thinking of Pastor Josh. He's the bishop. He calls himself bishop. He's the Karanga on me. I'm Emanyika, from a particular place actually called the Maungwe. So I've just thrown in a lot of detail there, but that's where it is.
I think as I'm getting older, I'm becoming more interested in African culture in general. I'm losing interest in, I don't know how this is going to make you feel, in Christianity as a religion, but I'm more interested in African culture, where African people come from, their way of thinking, their way of doing things, their commonalities in their customs and how they behave, the commonalities in their languages. So the reason why I'm asking about the Karanga, I'm interested in the Karanga people, and I love the language Shona, so I don't know if it's related. But before I start on a tangent from the onset, can we start this with a word of prayer?
Thank you.
Would you like to pray for us?
I don't mind. Let us pray. Father, you have promised and said, is there anyone who lacks wisdom? Let him ask of God who gives generously. We ask for your wisdom, that you may guide our thought processes, that we may engage, and that we may be as vulnerable and as truthful. Where we don't know where our thought processes end, we may be as honest, and where you have given us the knowledge, that we may be able to share. And I pray for my host, that you may be with him and be with me too, and everyone who is listening. There could be someone who's listening, Father, who's going through some turmoil. May you just come through for them in what they need. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Let me reintroduce myself to you and to someone who might be seeing this channel for the first time. My name is Dinano Mekuto. For short, they call me Dini. On this platform, I go by the name of Dinano. So feel free to refer to me as Dinano or Dini. That is fine. Thank you for joining us. Today we are hosting Pastor Tapiwa Mutseriwa. I used to be a hip hop head back in the day, and I used to rap, so I like things that rhyme. Pastor Tapiwa, please just introduce yourself beyond the name and maybe what your interests are currently in the gospel.
My name is Tapiwa Mutseriwa. I'm a pastor and currently on a study kind of a pursuit. And I'm originally from Zimbabwe, but I live in Australia. And gospel-wise, I'm interested in that very subject, the gospel, in very practical ways. What does it bring meaning of life to me? Not just fuzzy wuzzy, something that is out there in the air. I want it to come down to me, where I live, in my lived reality. How does the gospel affect? That's my interest. My worries, my joys, my fears, my family life, my everything, everything. How does it touch? Where does that gospel line collide with my lived reality?
How long have you been in ministry for?
As a past 15 years.
Something
Not
else?
that long. I've done quite a bit of stuff before that. I've been a teacher. I've been in finance. I've been, yeah, and then sort of into pastoral ministry.
What made you change make that transition from whatever else, teacher in finance, to move to personal ministry or pastoral duties?
I'll say there's a long answer to that, but I'll give you the short version. We have no time for the long answer. The short version is that it was not easy. It was not always easy to get into pastoral ministry in my younger days. You had to have money to go to Solusi, which, and I did attempt to do that. So there was always the passion for pastoral ministry, and I just couldn't get in there until in my more adult years. So I pursued that which was there. It had more money, but it didn't satisfy my heart.
The money thing.
Mhm.
You know, I think I know the importance of money, and somehow
I
I
do.
think, is it necessary for us sustenance as human beings?
I do not want to come across as a person who does not like the use of money. Now, it is necessary. Is it all? No.
Do you know the scripture in the Bible that says, "Money answereth all things"?
Yep.
In what do you think it means?
I think in terms of, you see, we are beings that are not just one entity. If you are thinking of a human being, a human being is a jigsaw puzzle with four pieces, if you like. I would believe there are more, but in very simple ways, four jigsaw puzzle pieces. We are physical beings. We need food. Don't be so spiritual that you don't eat food. That's why we need to exercise. We need to do all those kind of things because we are physical beings. That's not a spiritual thing. That's just meeting my physical aspect. We are social beings. This is why as a Christian, when the Bible says, then God said it is not good for men to be alone, He meant that it was speaking into the social aspect of men. So man is social. You would know about Robert Sobukwe, how they separated him from the rest of the prisoners for 6 years, and he lived by himself until he lost his mind. That is because we are created to be social beings. Then we are spiritual beings, and then we are psychological beings. Now, when we go back to the physical beings, you don't pray your way to building a house. You need money, and you need a house. So it meets that need, that part of the jigsaw puzzle, and in some ways your social aspect, but it is not all. It is
Do
not
you want
all.
to rate
We
those
can give
four
you
aspects?
all the money.
Let's focus on
Say that
these four
again.
for now. Let's focus on these four for now,
Yeah,
if we may.
yeah.
Can you rate them in importance and priority in your take, or do you think that's not important?
Would I shock you if I told you that they are equally important?
Okay,
That when
25,
you have
25,
one
25.
missing, 25 to maybe 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%.
Okay, okay. I'm
So
trying to go with
we are not.
conventional maths. Okay, I'm trying to go with conventional maths where 25 times 4 is 100. I think you go with the unconventional where we go to 400%. Maybe you dabble in crypto and you used to such games. I don't know. Sorry, you were about to say something.
What I'm saying is that you are fully a spiritual being. You are
Okay.
fully a physical being. You are fully a psychological being, and you are fully a social being. Um, they should I go there? Um, If any one of these is missing, something has gone wrong for you. When we sit with you in different other ways, when we sit with you and things are not going right, we could use these 4 things to triage what's going on for you and say, hey, as I sit before you, what is it that you're going through? Oh, it's a psychological issue. No, it's a spiritual issue. No, it's a physical thing. You've got gout. Maybe you're taking too much meat. Um, all those kind of things. We can try it using those 4 filters.
I don't want it to be a very structured conversation, but I did write down some things just so
All
that
right.
people who are joining us know it's not the first time I'm engaging you. I engaged
Right.
you briefly when you visited the South Africa recently, and I did write notes based on what we're talking about then, but I want to ignore those notes for now. If we have a long enough
I'm trying to switch.
conversation, put it on
I'm trying to
silent,
switch my.
Mfundisi. Yeah,
That's
because
what
you
I'm
also
trying to
reminded me
do.
to put mine on silent. No, take your time. Just try to figure it out and do it. It's okay.
All right. I think it's now on silent. Let's go.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll go to those if our conversation gets boring. Then I'll try to
All
find
right.
structure. But for
Right
now, I
structure.
just
All
want
right.
yeah. But for now, I just want it to be a flowing conversation. I think that's the term you used when we were talking on WhatsApp. Now let me go to where I first saw you and what drew me to you. I said this before we started this thing. You were preaching at the church where I fellowship here in South Africa, Kelvin on Athol, SDA, Seventh-day Adventist Church. I can't remember in detail what you were talking about, but I told you that what drew me to you is you shared a bit of vulnerability. A story which I hope you won't mind me briefly sharing, where you were
Go
called
ahead.
a liar, I think, and then your teacher had
Mm-hmm.
sent you to your parents to be beaten or to be punished because they had said that you did something that you didn't do, and you said that's a trigger for you. It really touched me because having grown up in the church for over 4 decades, I have never seen, or I can't remember hearing a pastor opening up to their vulnerabilities, right? And I told you I had an interview with Pastor Papu, I think about a year ago. He also, I want to say maybe reluctantly so, he shared something about his father, and he actually said, if for once I can be personal, which showed me that you guys do not like to open up about who you really are. Why is that? It's quite troubling for me. When I say you guys, I
So
mean pastors.
I get you. I get you. I get what you mean. So we are products of the Christian tradition, especially the Protestant Christian tradition. There are beautiful things about our tradition as Protestant Christians, but there are also aspects that are not so beautiful. If we want to be honest, we have come through the pathway of history to where we are has passed through what is called Puritanism. That is the aspect of trying to always appear holy and pure, which, in my understanding, and I'm happy for anyone else to have a different view from me. In my understanding, it actually goes against the gospel. So, to appear holy, pastors do not have issues. A friend of mine was joking and saying that pastors do not have conflict in their homes. They just have an intense moment of fellowship. It was a joke, obviously, but we are human beings. We make mistakes. We have triggers. We have our own personality issues. We have places, and the less we know, the less we have self-awareness, the more toxic we are to our congregations. A pastor that does not bleed cannot relate with the weaknesses of his church, cannot be as redemptive, because he knows where God has been redemptive to him, where God visits. He knows his own struggles as we strive for the mastery, to use the Bible language. As I meet with and I think that's the reason why God did not use angels to evangelize to human beings. He calls us in our weaknesses. It's Paul who says, even I, Paul, who has removed thorns from other people's flesh, God has used me to remove thorns from. But when I went to God and said, "Can you remove this?" He did not. He said, "My grace is sufficient for you." He's being vulnerable in Romans chapter 8, when he's 7, when he says, "I know the good that I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't do it. I find another law within my members." That's Paul being vulnerable, and that is because when I read that in Paul, I say, "Wow, Paul can be like this." I see myself in Paul. For me, that's more a personal ministry. My struggle with my congregation is God's struggle with me.
And your peers, do you ever engage on these things, and are they comfortable in opening up about who they are, or are there dangers that make you want to stay away from that part of being vulnerable amongst your congregation or your church?
So let me reflect from two different places. Let me reflect from a place that says, the more a pastor is informed to this current generation, hey, sometimes the pastoral ministry can be 20, 30, 40 years behind behind this generation. We are living in a generation that is more emotionally intelligent. So the more we remove that emotional aspect from our ministry, the more we are far removed from this post modern generation. This is the generation that has come post colonial, because all the atrocities have happened in religious contexts that are removed from feeling.
Okay.
That's why the pastor had to be structured and had to appear like he's got it all together. But now, the culture we are ministering to has moved on in terms of being authentic, emotionally, psychologically. So a ministry that is here and not here is so a pastor who wants to really minister to the current generation has no option but go there.
But how do you balance it? Because we still have the older generation, people who went through colonialism. I think I was
And I think that's why I
born.
say.
So how do you balance the
That's
two?
why I said
You still have the older generation. Yeah, sorry.
That's why I said I'm reflecting from two places. Then, I think you're bringing in the third aspect. The second aspect I wanted to reflect from is that there is a limit to vulnerability. Don't overexpose yourself. And I need to say that, because we can be brutal. We're gonna use what you have shared with us to destroy you. So be as vulnerable, especially when church is well done. It is about creating safe spaces to be vulnerable. So when I feel safe, I can be vulnerable. So we move that into that tradition. Now, talking about our older generation, sometimes you cannot teach old dogs new tricks. And I say this with as much respect as I can gather for our older men of God, if you like, because we stand on their shoulders. They've borne the brunt. They've done a lot of amazing work, but have they been perfect? I don't think so. We may not be able to change all the ways, but there are some of them that are doing well.
Third aspect.
So the third aspect was the change of culture, from toxic churches to safe churches, where we can feel safe to be vulnerable. Then the third aspect was more that we cannot change the old folk. We might just want to live in the same room with them, and yeah.
In terms of prep, when I'm fundis, how much prep do you guys get when you get into ministry, besides the theory of the theological aspect of what you are expected to do once you get the academic part of it. In terms of human interaction, dealing with human issues, being sensitive to different types of personalities, do you think that's done enough in the training to become a minister?
Let me speak for myself before I get stoned by my colleagues in the fraternity that I spoke for them. I will be honest and let you know that for me, my training, both undergrad and postgrad, trained this and to be an academic, to engage with the text, to deliberate on the text, to be profound in the Greek language, the prose, the all those words that are really nice to say when you are standing on the pulpit, how you do your gestures, how you read the text in the Greek Testament, in the Greek scriptures, and in the Hebrew scriptures. We are taught to do that very well. Textual criticism, all those kind of things, we are taught very well. But to deal with the person, that you learn when you get into. And sometimes I can tell you, I don't know the last time I've consulted the Greek text to understand what, but I can tell you that on a daily basis, I'm meeting personalities.
Okay, so as you're talking, I'm just thinking about some industry in the commercial world. And as you're saying what you're saying, I think what came to mind is that you have been taught to become marketers of the gospel. And you have not been trained well in the customer care aspect thereof. Would I be correct in my analysis of what you've just said?
I think there's an aspect of trying to be pastoral. There are, for example, I can't remember very well with the Solusi curriculum and Helderbeck. Their equivalent in Australia is called Avondale. It's called, when you're doing your undergrad, that prepare at the seminary that prepares you for pastoral ministry. It's called Bachelor in Ministry, in Theology and Ministry. The ministry aspect is trying for you to appeal to their heart. But the question is adequate. Is it adequate? Is it something that is enough? I don't think so. I don't think so. So there is some training to say how to be courteous, not to throw insults from the pulpit, and to have a heart that feels. There are some aspects to that, but I'm not so sure they are enough to. Sometimes I think a teacher is trained a bit more to feel for the students than a pastor is for his congregation.
But my primary school teachers, it looked like they didn't teach they didn't learn any of that. Now, having gone through
I'll be
this,
surprised if you went back to the primary school where they're still the same now.
I think it still is. I saw a Facebook post a while back. I went to Bishop Primary, by the way, in the Eastern Cape. So I'm trained in journalism, and there was a former student. We were both students at the same time. She took her journalism further. She worked for a newspaper. Anyway, she wrote an article about a teacher that was going through disciplinary for some harsh punishment on the student. Now, this was probably in 2019. I left that school in 1992. And you see, 20, 30 years on, it looked like those issues were still happening. Anyway, we might digress, but yeah, I don't know how much of the human care aspect they grasp. But I think sometimes, as human beings in general, we don't tend to care much for one another. Probably care much for our loved ones, but Nabo, they might have a thing or two to say about us being selfish. But now I want to go to, I'm sorry, maybe I'm personalizing this thing, but I think the understanding of a profession or a tradition or something that we are not part of can only come from personal experiences of someone who's been a part of that. I would like to assume that when we go through academics or learning about something, we have preconceived ideas and we have certain understanding of what that thing is until we get on the field. Now, personally, are there things that took you off guard when you got on the field in ministry and be like, hey, no, I went to school for this. I thought I knew it, but this I did not expect.
So let me tell you, the best way to answer that question is a story.
Thank you.
I finished my 4 years of training. I've got my bachelor's of theology and ministry. The year I finished, my first deployment was to the Sydney Adventist Hospital. That is in the city of Sydney. We've got an Adventist. It's the largest private hospital in all of New South Wales, and I think it's the third largest in all of Australia. Really well managed, state of the art place. I go there. The shock of my life was that I was not prepared for the lived realities of people, especially where it comes to pain. I was trained to have this approach that is more, persuasive, argumentative, propositional. This is the truth. You need to get saved, and to argue towards that, than to hear a person sitting before you telling you that I've got cancer and I've been given 3 months. There is no argumentative propositional truths you can say to that person that is going to be healing. Nothing had prepared me for that. Sitting before someone who's telling you that they've got post-traumatic stress disorder from a childhood rape from their father. Nothing had ever prepared me. So yes. That is, to answer your question, I don't know whether I've done, but yeah, it's true.
How do you navigate such situations? So when you're hit by that reality, then what do? You can't argue, you can't try to convince this person about the Trinity or the divinity of Christ, but you have to meet their need where they are and address maybe the pain that they are going through or the disappointment from being raped by a father.
In the spirit of vulnerability, I'm feeling safe to be vulnerable because I can see your audience. I'm just seeing your kind face, so I can be vulnerable. So here I am. After that year, I get called into local church pastoral ministry. I've got all the theology. I think I know it all. The surprising thing is, the more I'm getting into ministry, the more I am actually beginning to understand that I know this much. Then I knew this much. I thought I knew this much. So I get called to this lady who has just, I've got a senior pastor who is working with me, but he's got his own congregation. I've got my own congregation. So, but he's still my supervisor. I'm in 10. So I've got to see this lady. She has just lost her husband, and she is crying to God and having this anger, the hatred for God for what she has gone through. And I went in there with all the theology I could master to convince her that God is right in that aspect. And she got so broken that she kicked me out of her house. In 30 minutes of being there, I left and wondering what I'd done wrong, because all I'd done was open the scriptures. And then the senior minister called me, because this lady actually called the conference and said, the pastor doesn't know what he's doing, and he's actually hurting me, this and that. And then, well, the conference knew what they're doing. They've dealt with so many of those stories. They were very kind to me. And so they called the senior pastor. The senior pastor calls this lady. They talk over the phone. He understands the situation. Now he wants me to learn. So he comes along with me and says, I want you to take along, but when we get there, that lady is so angry with you. I've persuaded her for you to come along. So you get there, you zip your mouth. Don't say a thing. So we got there. The lady started narrating her ordeal. Oh, God, how could God, da, 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 da. And the senior minister says to this lady, hey, if God was sitting on that chair, there was an empty chair in the place where we were. If God was sitting in that chair, what would you say to him? He said, oh, bang, bang, bang. And she's saying all these words against God. Bang, 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 bang. I said, thank you for sharing that with me. Let's kneel down to pray. And the minister, the old minister, said, Father in heaven, join our sister in asking you these questions. Then he went word for word, repeating what the lady had said. We are joining her. Why did you? How could you? Where were you? All those kind of questions. And then we finished. In exactly 20 minutes, we were out of that place. But just as we are exiting, she says, thank you so much, Pastor. Thank you. You've really, really cared for me. And I'm thinking, wow, the pastor did not do anything theological. She just stayed under the dark cloud. The answer to your question is, it is in the fray that we learn. We have just said some things about the oldies a few minutes ago, but there's a lot to learn from them. They have learned from being with the people, not from college. So being with the people and understanding their pain and just sitting with them, and ministry itself will teach you. You just need to be humble enough.
I want to assume, Fundis, that it can't be easy for people in ministry to be doing all this counseling and taking in all these issues from their congregants or from people that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think I might have said this to you when we had an engagement earlier, but it has come to my mind once or twice when I was engaging a man of God. And I thought to myself, because I felt at that moment when I was having a conversation with that person that they were going through a lot. And I sense that they are not getting the proper help they need, maybe psychologically or otherwise, to deal with whatever they were dealing with. So I have a question. Who counsels the counselor? When you counsel these people, when you go there, you shoulder all these issues. How do you get rid of them?
Let me say, today's pastor knows that he's not trained to be a counselor. Nothing in our pastoral ministry trains us to be counselors. That does not mean that there is not any counseling that happens within pastoral fraternity. We do, but it is just very minimal, where we use the wisdom of, just being a human being, and we are there and helping a little bit. Today's pastor should know how to refer and say, this is beyond my skill set, and refer to the proper counselor. Some pastors have gone on to get the training to be able to counsel. But if you have any kind of counseling training, you know that there's something called supervision. Supervision is different in the counseling psychotherapy sort of world. It's not the conventional word supervision where someone is towering over you. It is going to a counselor colleague and saying, hey, this is what is going on for me. Because there's something we call picking the monkey. I sit with you, you give me a lot of your emotion. As I leave, I'm carrying some heavy burden on me. You have transferred, it's actually called counter transference. You have transferred to me. There are buttons that have been pressed within me by your story. It could be a story of something that you're going through. It's pressing my own. So we begin to have what is called compassion fatigue. And if we are not careful, it comes through on the pulpit. Especially these days with sermons that are coming on social media, you can tell this guy, whoa, it's right up to here with him because of the way he's actually coming across. So in counseling we need that supervision where you go for clinical supervision. But a pastor also needs some kind of accountability partner. Pastor, this is a friend you're talking to. Some people that have enough funds could actually have a coach kind of a person that they debrief with. Debriefing is huge, it's massive. In terms of self-care, I've expended myself emotionally, spiritually, and I'm fatigued. I've no more compassion to give. I need to debrief. I need to get in touch with myself as to where. So self-awareness is a biggie, but that comes through sitting with other people. So we need accountability partners, even as pastors. That guy you can trust and say, hey, look, there is someone I'm talking to. I was chatting with someone, but I think this chat is getting cheesy. This chat is getting a little bit offhand, and I just needed someone to hold me because I think my mind is I'm just losing it a little bit. That person, as you can see, I'm not talking about a pastor who thinks they are very strong, because in thinking we're strong, we become weak.
Are there enough of those in the Adventist church? Those mentors or those people where you can be vulnerable with, who can help you offload?
I have found them to be there. How many are there? I don't know, but I've found accountability partners that I know will not judge me, because they need to have confidentiality. They need to have this what is called unconditional positive regard, where they don't judge you, where they don't. I'm asking you to be an accountability partner, not to be my judge. Oh, Jesus had an accountability partner. Watch with me, friends. Peter, James, and John, watch with me. My soul is exceedingly sorrowful. Couldn't you just watch with me? Guys, I'm weak. I'm feeling weak right now. What more of me, a human being that it...
When you say watch with me, are you making reference to when he said they must go with him to pray and they fell asleep?
Yes, Jesus was at his weakest in terms of the humanity of his aspect. He was at his weakest point, where fear was kicking in, fear of death and eternal separation. Father, if possible, let this cup pass. That was cup of death that he was afraid of. So he's talking to his friends, guys, I'm afraid. Can you watch with me?
Here's a two-part question then. When you got into ministry, it's an assumption on my part, maybe there was a topic or an aspect of the gospel that you were interested in. I'd like to think, as we grow in whatever profession, I don't know if you take it as a profession, as a calling, maybe you can also tell us what you take it as. You must have been drawn to something else, or a different topic, or a different aspect. Is there such in your own experience?
Yes, I believe in Adventism. Gives me structure, gives me a handle to life. Not just the propositional, argumentative, as I said, aspects of my faith. And the more I'm immersing myself in this, the less I'm persuaded towards argumentative, propositional. When I've used that phrase quite a lot. Let me just define it for a moment. I'm talking about this idea of Bible bashing people. I'm the remnant, you are lost, you keep this day, I keep this day, and so, which means, and the mark of the beast, this other, that leader of that church is the mark of the beast, all those kind of things. I'm less persuaded towards that, but I still believe in what Adventists believe. Just what it means is different. It is now coming from a place of meaning. So to answer directly your question, when I started off, I thought the Lord needed me to evangelize the world, because I need my neighbor, I need all these people to not go to hell. Now, the more I'm discovering this, that it's not about my neighbors not going to hell in the by and by. It's about my neighbors not living in hell now because of me. That if you die, you need to believe this, a Bible verse, you need to believe this, or else you're going to hell in the by and by. No. What I'm actually doing right now is I'm causing hell while they are still alive. Now I'm more persuaded to relationships. For me, that's what's big. When Jesus is asked about which is the greatest commandment, Jesus goes back to the Old Testament and says, this was what it was supposed to be about. Connect with God, love your God. That's what I mean, with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your mind. He said, connect with God. Because when you come back from there, from connecting with God, you just cannot offend people. You will do people well. That's why he says, then the second, he has been asked about one, then he says, the second is like unto the first. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So this relational aspect, and we are believers in the cross. The cross is thus shaped because it's connection with God, then connect with people. Period. The rest is commentary. So for me, it's about making relationships now.
Let me now take the load off you. How do
Right.
I, as a professed follower of Christ, find myself in a position where you find yourself in, where you realize that it's about relationships, it's about treating your neighbor well, it's about caring for others and not always focusing on yourself? How do I bring myself to that realization? Or what does it take? Maybe we can start with the personal and then generalize. How did you get to that point?
For me personally, it was a journey of saying, what is this thing really about? The thing about growing, growth is not just adding years to your life, it's adding life to your years. In the aspect of saying, there are things in your life, if you were to get a metaphor of your life as a room, as your sitting room, when you buy that piece of furniture, there is one that is in the foreground because it's so special. You love it, but as you get used to this room, you find that furniture that used to be in it recedes into the background, while something else maybe that was in the background is becoming more prominent to you. That this piece of furniture, I didn't quite like it, but now it has more symbolic meaning. I inherited it from my mother. It may have no beauty in it, cosmetic beauty in it. The aesthetics of it is way off, but it has now meaning because I got it from my uncle or my grandfather. Now that, and you hang it on the wall, that black and white picture that has no value in terms of dollar value, and was not well done. Maybe it fell under some bricks sometime and it got moldy, but now you framed it well. It's standing there because it's now got more meaning. Because the more you grow, the more you find you are looking for meaning of life. Where do you get hell? It's not just about I like this, I like that, I like this. What does it mean for me? So there is your growth right there. That's what it happens with me in terms of what I believe. There were things that were in the foreground that are now in the background. There were things that were in the background that are now in the foreground. Some of the furniture I've completely chucked out. It's not meaningful. So I've thrown it out to the road for anyone to pick who wants to pick it, or those garbage people will pick it up and throw it away.
You said something about a topic that you're more interested in lately.
The
Do
gospel.
you remember when we had that conversation?
Yes, the gospel and what it means in my lived reality, where the rubber meets the road. What does the gospel mean?
No. We had a conversation at my brother's place. I think
Oh, yes,
you had
yes, yes.
come.
Sorry, I thought you meant before today.
No,
Sorry, sorry.
not now.
Yeah.
Do you remember our conversation? And you said there's something that you mostly interested in these days. I don't want to say it for you. I want to see how great your mind is in tapping into those memory banks.
All right, now you are exposing me, bro. You're exposing me. I say what I'm saying right there in that moment because that is what is talking about. Well, I would say there are two things I would have said, knowing me. I can't. I'm trying to reconstruct that conversation. It was a sad kind of an environment. My heart was more in connecting with you in what you were going through at that time, but I would have said something to do with Christianity and my Africanity. Could be
You've
something
got
to
it.
that effect.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Can we
All
talk
right.
more on that? What's your interest
Feel
on
free.
that? Maybe. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's go there if you like.
Yeah, just explain it, Mfundisi. Put it into words that it's gonna be easy for someone to understand what this interest is all about, and where you would personally like to take it.
So there are two aspects. Number one is an issue of identity. You know, we were talking about the four aspects that make men that we are, and one of them was social. I am an African, so I'm a Christian, but I'm not Asian Christian. I'm African Christian. So that's my identity. If I lose my identity, if I don't know who I am, I'm not even safe even to the Asian friend of mine, because the less I understand myself, the more toxic I become. It's like the graph of identity stands at the center of being, and I'm talking about who you really are. If I don't have that sense of who I am socially, it means that jigsaw puzzle that makes one of the four is not in its place. So that picture is shaky. So it comes through in my personality. It comes through because I'm feeling less of who I am. Then there's the issue of esteem. So I attack other people in order to fill that void. You know, every time you see anyone attacking someone, it is they're trying to make up for something that is void within themselves. Because if you feel adequate within yourself, then you are more safe to be around. So I have to find my place as an African Christian. Does God love Africans? In so saying, I'm asking, does God really love me? That stands at the center, at the core of what the gospel is. Or do I need to be a European before I can be accepted of God?
You say African Christian. Why not Christian African? Why do you choose to start with your birth canal identity?
Because Christianity is something that is very cognitive. You understand? It's spiritual, but it comes through the process of how you process your thought processes. In fact, the invitation from God is, come now, let us reason together. He does not say, come now, let us feel together, or and I'm saying this, I'm at a risk of ridiculing other faith, and I will wave my hand before you and you fail, and then you fall down, and then you know I'm God. No. And that reasoning process happens because I've grown as a social person. So it happens in the context of who I am already before I was Christian. So the conversation starts there. God, like the conversation between God and Moses. So who are you? What do you have in your hand? Who are you? God is asking Moses, who are you? What do you have in your hand? What I have in my hand is that I'm a black African from Southern Africa. Do I have place in the purpose and will you have for the whole of humanity? So I can save my congregation that is full of whites and full of Asians and South Americans and Aboriginals, because I know who I am. At places where I feel I'm being demeaned, I do not allow them to demean me because I know who I am. At a place where we have cross-cultural issues happening, I can see that this question is about culture. It's not about spirituality.
Can one find identity in their religion, or does identity come first and then the religion or the faith or whatever they believe in enhances what they already know about who they are in their identity?
Let me see if you will agree with me that I've answered that question when we started this conversation in saying your true identity is not just one entity. So Christianity as identity is only is only catered for by my spirituality, by my spiritual being. That's a quarter, if you like to go with your analogy of 25%. That's not all of who I am. I'm not always Christian. You know, when I break my leg, don't pray for me. Carry me to the hospital. You know, when I am going through depression, I need therapy. So this is all of who I am. It's not just my spirituality. So it's not one or the other. It's both end. I'm African. That's my social identity. I'm Christian. That's my spiritual identity. Someone would say I'm Muslim. That's their spiritual identity. Someone would say I'm that. That's their spiritual identity. And then coming to psychological, I've got a psychological identity. You can see my personality. I talk too much or I talk less. I'm a sanguine. I'm a what. That's my identity psychologically. And physically, I'm tall. I'm shorter. Whichever way you are looking at me, you are seeing that physical. That's all of who I am. You can't ask me, do you find your identity in being short only, not in being Christian? No, I'm all of that.
Yeah, we are kind of like going back to where we started, because
Yeah.
as you are elaborating now, I'm still, this is how my brain works. If I have a certain understanding of a topic or of an approach to something, I am so stubborn in my understanding that you need to convince me beyond my stubborn mind that your point is how things are, right? So you said they are all equal. In my growing up in Christianity, I felt like the spiritual aspect should supersede all other aspects in how you navigate life.
Puritanism.
Is that
That's
what
what
it's
I was
called?
telling you about.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there danger to Puritanism? Is there danger to this
Yes.
approach or this outlook that I have? Tell us about that.
The danger is this. One, it is what has given gap to some voices that have arisen, without mentioning names, that have arisen in Africa, in totally rejecting Christianity, because some people do not find their identity in Christ. Where is my Africanity? Because we have to sing like Europeans, we have to stand like Europeans, so that we can be Christian. That's the danger. We have totally lost who we are. We can't sing like Africans. We can't dance like Africans. Africans dance in worship. There's no sin in that. Because God does not speak the heavenly language, by the way. When it comes to us, he has divested himself of all heavenly language to speak to human beings. Even Hebrew and Greek are not heavenly languages. Those are cultures, human cultures, that God has to speak so that we can understand him at our level. So what we have done is
Even
the language
English,
that
right?
God spoke, even English. So the language that God spoke to Europeans in trying to connect with them, the meaningful, talk about art. Those people are trying to make meaning for themselves when they paint that Jesus with blue eyes. They're trying to make meaning. That is not wrong for them. But an Asian will not subscribe to that, because Christ has come to become a human being, not to be a European. Christ has come to relate with the African in the village. Can you draw, if you're going to make a PowerPoint presentation of Jesus, would you make something that we relate with? Because all about God in the Bible is symbolic. So, can we speak African? If there's anything like that, can we speak African? God speaks African when he wants to talk to us. So,
But here
still
it looks
Yahweh.
like,
Go.
it looks like, when I say here, I'm talking about South Africa and a lot of East African, Southern African countries. It looks like God, especially in the musical ministry, he only speaks in English.
We lost it there. I've just come from a funeral. That's why I'm putting on a black shirt. I was rushing to get to this point, and these people are Africans, African Anglicans. Is it that word Anglican?
Yeah, English. Yeah.
The beauty of it is I was there. They were singing in their African language. They were doing it in an African way. I couldn't just help but they were worshiping God, the God of the Bible. But they did not have European constraints. They were authentically themselves.
Why do we struggle with this as Adventists? Here, you are from the same region as me. You've seen this thing. I can call groups from Zim. Stand is the one that comes up. Shower Power. I think Shower Power had a couple of songs in our languages. But you'd find that the majority. I went to a concert of Gloria Sounds there, a group I love, a choir from where I come from in the Eastern Cape. I got there late. There were probably, when I was there, they sang about 17 songs. And I think out of those 17, only 3 or 4 were in our languages. But it doesn't matter to other people. Do you think it's important that we come to Christ as we are?
It is, because we are then being authentic. Because when we leave who we are and try to be something else, it means there is a certain standard that we are trying to feel so that God can accept us. And that is what is called legalism. Thinking that we're trying to appease God by the standards that have been set by someone else. If God is saying, what do you have in your hand? In worship, what do you have in your hand? Come.
Why do you approach him like this, Mfundisi? Is it because of the way he was presented, or the gospel was presented to us? So we think this is how we should present ourselves before God.
You're not talking about that. Do you understand that the gospel did not start? There is a gap of 400 years before the gospel hits Europe. And yet it is already in Africa. So that spins the argument that a lot of people would say about, the Europeans brought their God to us. No.
Let's talk about it. Let's delve into it.
Yeah. Would you if you I don't know where you want to start, because so many thoughts are coming into my head right now. If you understand,
give us your thoughts. Go with your thoughts.
So talk about 500 years before Christ. Maybe I've overstretched it. 650 BC. The time is the time of, so 5 centuries before Christ. Isaiah comes on the scene, and God is speaking through Isaiah and says, let me read it for you. I've got it. I was actually looking at it a moment ago.
Okay. Give me the scripture. I'll look it up on my side too.
It is Isaiah 18, verse 1 through to 6. He talks about the rivers, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Is a land
18,
where...
verse 1 to 6, you say?
Yep. You want to read it?
Yeah, 18. No, please read it, Mfundisi.
To your strong and powerful nation, to your tall and smooth-skinned people who are feared all over the world. Listen, everyone who lives on earth, look for a signal flag to be raised on the mountaintops. Listen to the blowing of the bugle. The Lord said to me, I will look down from heaven as quietly as the dew forms. You could continue reading this text. Before the grapes are gathered, when the blossoms have all fallen, and I'm on verse 5, and the grapes are ripening, enemy will destroy the Ethiopians as heavily as a knife cuts branches from a vine. So here is a prophecy on Ethiopia. Now, understand the Ethiopia that is being talked about here. It is the Ethiopia that is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. So both Niles, the rivers of Ethiopia, are the two Niles. contextually, the Nile is mentioned in there. So the two Niles, their source is Lake Victoria. So we are looking at a land that is beyond Lake Victoria. So around East Central Africa. Guess what? That is the cradle of the Bantu. You and I, we draw our ancestors from that place. We have migrated because of the Greek wars, the Greek Empire, with Hannibal and Africanus. Africanus was actually a European who invaded Africa, and most of these Bantu people are pushing further down south, and then they also colonize the Sen. We take over their land, but we are more. Everyone who is Bantu comes from this place. This is the prophecy. This prophecy is about these people. That's why the Umvelingaki, if you like, in whatever language you speak, Unkulunkulu, Mngari, the one who dwells in heaven. We are not taught this by the missionary. We already have a knowledge of this God.
So nini na nini. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You will find that the idea, because this is beyond in the Old Testament, the idea of circumcision is something that we are already moving away from that place with. We have been introduced to Yahweh before. Long before a European knows about Yahweh, we have already known Yahweh. Now come to the new Christian church.
Wait, Mfundisi, before you go there, you say we've been introduced before the advent of Europeans. Have you gone far in trying to find out if we're introduced or we already had this relationship and how we got to having this relationship and understanding or the knowing of Umdali, Umvelingange, Sonini Nanini? How has your interest in this topic? How far back does
In this
it go?
topic, it goes even way further back, because here I was talking about 500 years, even 600 years before Christ. We could go way back to say 1600 before Christ. Where am I at? I am with. So that word that we saw written in Isaiah is Ethiopia. It's a word that has been coined way later when the Bible is translated by the Jews from the Hebrew language into the Greek language, because the Jews for about 200 years before Christ have dispersed into the Greek-speaking world, so they translate the Old Testament into Greek, what is called the Septuagint. So they are now having new words. Actually, it's not a literal translation, it is a new word for the original word, which is Cush. So where you go, if you go to the Hebrew scriptures, that word there is not Ethiopia. Ethiopia is an English, not English, it's a Greek word that was coined, meaning the one with a bent face.
Okay.
So it's not a literal translation. It is more of a, what's the word? It's more of an inferred word. Oh, you're talking about those people. We now call them the Ethiopians. But the Bible itself, if you read the Hebrew scriptures, it actually calls them Cush. Where do we find Cush? In Genesis chapter 10 and Genesis chapter 11. We already find Cush there. We also know, if we keep going, by the time we get to Keturah, the mother of, if you like, the great-grandmother of who is Moses' father-in-law? What's his name? Jethro. Jethro is Moses' father-in-law. He comes from the line, he's Abraham's descendant, but not from Sarah, but from Keturah, who is a Cushite. This is why Moses and Miriam and Aaron have an issue over this Cushite woman. You remember they were saying, why have you taken Zipporah, this black woman, Do you remember that this man, the father of Zipporah, when he meets with Moses in the desert, when Moses is now coming back from Egypt and meet in the desert, Jethro is already a priest of God, not of any other God, but of Yahweh. So when the children of Israel when they go into captivity, there is this tradition here through Abraham of people that already know about Yahweh. And these people are Africans, they're black people. And as the Jewish tradition comes through Moses, Moses has to be reintroduced to this God. It is by the burning bush in Midian that he meets Yahweh. I wonder what kind of conversations he would have had with Jethro, also known as Raguel. That word means the one who worships God. So it is actually a nickname. That's why some people think that they are two different people. No, it's actually the same person. He worshipped Yahweh. He was a priest of Yahweh.
This information
It's in the Bible.
in your perception of our church, have you ever presented such information to the Adventist church? Would you? How do you think it will be received, or it should be received?
I remember one or two places where I've presented it in Zim, and it was well received because people were finding their identity. It was wow, this is who we are. So contrary to the the storyline that comes, so there are two extreme ends, and always be worried about extremes. One extreme end says that we have to avoid this Christianity is altogether Western. You realize as we tell this story, there's no Greek there, there's no French person there in that Old Testament. There's no Danish or Swedish person there. So it is actually not true to say that Christianity is all European. And the other extreme end is to now, when you have accepted Christianity, is to fail to see the European traditions in Christianity. There is a lot of European baggage in Christianity that we have carried with us that is meaningless.
Is that coming from the scriptures themselves, or is it coming from the ones that claim to have brought the gospel to us? The traditions you speak of, the European traditions you speak of, can you extrapolate them from the Bible itself, or is it a matter of the people who were bringing the book itself to Africa or to the southern parts of Africa? Because there's understanding that the book has been in Kush, that area of Central or the Horn of Africa, way before the Europeans got here. So when you speak of these customs, of these traditions, these European traditions that are in the gospel or in Christianity, are they from the book or are they from the people themselves?
So let's define tradition. Tradition is sometimes we say it's biblical, but at first value it is, because I'm gonna go into the Bible and look at a story and then run with it. For example, here's a good tradition that you could pick. You could pick a tradition that says it is biblical to. You could say it is biblical to have slaves, and I can give you verses. If you're a literal reader of the Bible, I can make a very convincing argument that slavery is not a moral issue. It's actually very biblical. And you understand that from the about 400 years ago to maybe as late as 150 years ago, slavery was actually underwritten by Christianity, ultra-right Christianity that was very conservative, very stringent. They read the Bible literally.
I've got a weird brain. My mind is stuck on the moral and the biblical. When you say it's biblical, that's your argument, right? Slavery. Does that then mean it's righteous? Okay.
No, I'm actually saying you can make a biblical argument. I'm not saying it's biblical.
Oh, okay.
You can make an argument that it is biblical, because you go to Exodus there, a man should treat his slave this way or that way. In the New Testament,
the slave do not work on the Sabbath. Yes.
All those kind of things. You could make that. But it is because someone has read through their lenses of what they want. So they've arrived at a position, and then they read their position into the Bible. So as they translate the Bible, the tradition now comes out of the Bible so that it reads the way they want it to read. And there's still a lot of that today, that people already have a position they want. So they've created a God after their own likeness, and they read that God into the Bible.
Then what's stopping is, could that be regarded as something wrong? And where I'm going with this
Yes.
would be, shouldn't then Africans portray God the way they see themselves? Would that also be wrong?
So we have that. We have that. Those are the voices that the latest voices in Africa that are trying to Africanize God, which is wrong, because then we are only committing the same crime that the Europeans have committed.
Should we then keep him European?
No, he's not European. Neither is he African. He's
What
not
is he?
Adventist. He's God. He created Europeans. He created Africans. But
His
he's going
son-
to speak our language. Yeah.
His son
Say
in
that
human
again.
form? His son in human form, what identity did he take?
If you wanted to make a very literal argument, again, that is the literal reading of the Bible. If you wanted to make a literal argument, you could say he's Middle Eastern, and if you wanted the color of his skin, he's more olive than white, and he's a little lighter than black.
What's your take on, I'm going to say it new because it is new to me. And I've hosted a number of people who are coming with this approach that, well, some say Israel, let me not say Israel, let me say the land of Canaan that was promised to the Israelites that were in captivity in Egypt. Some people are saying it is not where we know it to be. In that Gaza Strip, where there's a war happening, well, they say there's a truce now. I don't know if it has stopped. It is actually somewhere where we are. Some make the argument that if you look at the animals that are written about in the Bible, they say those animals are not found in that area. Some people who counter that argument say, no, man, animals get extinct. Some say it is said to be a mountainous area, a place with mountains, right? Some say that place is not as mountainous as it is claimed to be. It has hills. Mountains are in sub-Saharan Africa. Some say the Exodus could not have taken 40 years to move from Egypt to that place which is now known as the Middle East. This must have been a migration of thousands of kilometers. That is why it took 40 years. Have you heard such arguments? What's your take on those things?
Unfortunately, you see, so let me I'm trying to see what to say and not what to say for the sake of clarity and not shooting above or not shooting beneath. So I'm trying to measure it in the sense. So it is not true. You can literally trace the Exodus, literally, word for word. The Bible is not just a book of fairy tales. Those places are still there, and you can see the Mount Horeb is there. You can go and stand on Mount Nebo and see the land beyond Jordan. There is Moab. You can see Moab. The Ashdodites. We know where they lived through archaeology, through the story. So the Bible is also a historical book. We can actually through archaeology we can actually copy and paste and make this. So yes, Canaan is the land of Israel. There's no doubt about that. And there are people that are still the descendants of the Canaanites that I've met, literally met that, and they'll tell you that I'm a Canaanite. So there is the tradition of the people that have been the Canaanites. So there are emotional arguments that we make so that we can fit, because that is a reactive argument to someone who has made Christ European. So as an African, I feel left out. So I make a counter argument that is reactive and want to fit into there. There was a thought that was just coming into my mind. So James Kuhn, for a lot of my African theologians that have found meaning in what is called liberation theology. It is a theology that comes from South American Catholic into the African Americans, and then they are the ones that start talking about Christ as black. But if you read James Kuhn is the one who starts that. If you read James Kuhn in his understanding properly without emotion, he is not saying Jesus is black as in the color skin black. He is saying what Jesus has suffered is what the African Americans have suffered. They talk about the lynching tree as the cross when they were being lynched. So he draws those parallels, and then he says, his concluding argument, he says, do you think Jesus was a white American or an African American? So he fits the story of Jesus into what the African Americans are going through. So when he concludes and says Jesus is black, a literal reader would then say, well, here is an argument that has been made by a scholar that Jesus was black, but he's not actually saying that, because that is the beginning.
Let's go with your take. Let's go with your take. I want us to wrap up now. I think it's interesting that you say the Europeans claim that he is like them. Now, it sounds like you're saying there are now Africans that claim that he's like them. But interestingly enough, if indeed he was from the Middle East, is it not interesting that the people that, according to your understanding, are the people of Christ, the Middle Eastern people, I would say maybe the Arabs, I don't know what you'd call them, don't seem to care much about this Christ?
Yep. And personally, that's where I actually believe in more spiritual warfare around this. So before I begin to sound weird, let me explain what I mean. So these theologies that have been made in institutions, let me break it down. So the European machine that comes up from way back 4th century after Christ, AD, the Europeans take over the Christian agenda for political reasons. So there's something called political Christianity. So that's an institution in itself. So
would this be Rome?
It is. That's Rome. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So
through the councils, the Laodicean councils, and those gatherings.
Exactly. Now, by the time I'm sad to tell you that even Protestantism is not free from this. So if you look at the Reformation of Martin Luther, you go to Germany and you go to those places that are Lutheran.
No, before we get to the Reformation, I think I disturbed you a bit. Let's go back to, say, 4th century Europe. What happens there? And then you take it then to Martin Luther and them.
They take Christianity for political reasons. They want to gather. You know, the Caesars are ruling, and now there is mayhem within the empire, and they are looking for something that can glue the nations together. And Christianity just happens to be in all these nations, because each nation worships its own god. So Constantine says, what can I use to bring them together? Christianity just becomes a convenient thing to use for his political end. So he incorporates Christianity into his political agenda. So the next Caesar becomes the Pope. And you can go through the city of Rome. You look at this pillar that has been put for this Caesar, Pontificate Maximus Septimius, Pontificate Maximus. And the next in line is a Pope, which means the Pope has taken that political agenda to rule all of what is now called Europe. So this is a machine that rewrites history, rewrites the Christian agenda within an institution. So it's biased towards that institution. So you can imagine, to the exclusion of others. So those words like excommunication, those are words to exclude, because it's a political agenda. If you don't fit here, they're using God, they're weaponizing God, that if you don't fit within this mold, they're using God to scare you into that mold, or then you're going straight to hell. So the idea of hell itself is an idea that comes within the institutionalizing of Christianity. Now, those of us that have felt left out, we create our own institution to counter this institution. So we begin to rewrite within an institution. We have got also our own biases. Guess what has been left at the center? It is the truth. There's no truth here, there's no truth here, because these are reactive arguments. They are not proactive arguments. So right at the center is the gospel. As an Adventist, this is where I hear the gospel saying, "Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven with an everlasting gospel to preach to every nation, tongue, and kindred." But if it is in a tongue and if it is in a kindred, it means that if it's that word nation is translated from the Greek word ethnos, meaning ethnic. When God comes to meet me at my ethnic baseline, he speaks Shona, he speaks Zulu, he speaks Xhosa. He uses the symbols within the Xhosa, the codes of language, the symbols of language within the Xhosa language to speak to me. So the word Dimvelingagi is not coming from the Hebrew language. It's coming from within the Xhosa. So how do Xhosas worship? How do Shonas worship? Imbube, Itatamiya, is our own way of doing things. We are not going to sing like Europeans. That was institutionalizing and imposing it on us. Let's all come as God's children and tolerate each other. And where I've seen it being done properly, the Europeans think we have something to contribute. So the gospel, can I just make this point? I'm going to make this point, and I hope you will like it, because I like it. So this goes back now to Babel. At Babel, the ethnics, the ethnos, the nations, they get divided by languages. It is because of human self-centeredness that people are making. People have been separated. Now come to the cross. The children of Seth. Not the children of Seth. The children of Ham, the Africans. The children of Japheth, the Europeans, and the children of Shem, the Middle Easterns. The ones that separated at Babel, they are there at the cross. There is that African man, Simon of Cyrene. He's a black dude who's there at the cross. There are Roman soldiers, the Europeans. They are there at the cross. There are Jews, the children of Shem, at the cross. As if to say, that which separated in Babel is being brought back together at the cross. Wait. Go now to the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes. These ethnos now are being brought together. No, not so that, and guess what? The Holy Spirit is making them speak languages that they understand. Extrapolate what languages mean. It's a culture.
Interesting, Fundis. I want us to close it off now. In your experience, what is the meaning of the gospel?
The meaning of the gospel is that sin robs us of dignity, but God wants to restore that dignity. That's what the gospel means. It is the healing of a soul that has been robbed of dignity. I could give you a story in the Bible for you to see it. One in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament. quickly,
Let's do that, and then we
Adam
close it off.
Adam has sinned in the garden, and sin has stolen dignity from Adam. How do we know? Because now when a man has a shame and guilt hanging over him, he hides away from God. Why? Because dignity has been stripped off him. That's the symbol of that story. That sin degrades, sin robs you of dignity. When God comes, he's not coming to shame Adam. He's coming to clothe him. That's the gospel. A new story in the parallel in the New Testament is a woman caught in the very act. Now, having grown up in the townships of Africa, I can see a woman who has been caught with another man's husband, with another woman's husband. They drag her through the streets. You know, those names that we call her. She's so ashamed when they drag her right through to the temple and then they bring her to the feet of Jesus. While there, Jesus deals with those that are casting stones at her. When he finishes, Jesus does not say, "Hey, prostitute," he says, "Woman." Oh, of course, you are hearing this in the English language. In the original, the literal translation should be lady, as in Lady Diana. This sinner is now being dignified. You know, when I picture that story, I think the woman does not believe that Jesus is talking to her. I mean, you. No, I'm not a lady, I'm a prostitute. No,
Start
you are a
looking
lady.
around. Yeah.
No, you are a lady because that's what I created you to be. That's the gospel in its
Amen.
simplest form.
God restoring us with his righteousness.
Yes.
Amen. Fundisi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
I've
you.
started something here on the channel that when I invite a guest comes, shares their thoughts with us, their experiences. People every now and then might have something controversial or something new or something that the audience or the regular followers of the channel might not agree with. So I am putting an invitation to you to come back and indulge us. Maybe after a week or two or a month after the video has been published, to engage the audience who might want to challenge or might want to engage you on your experience, perhaps, or on your claims, or on your convictions. Would you be willing to do that?
Very well.
It's done in
Because
a respectful manner. It's done in a respectful manner, and I want to make sure that we don't come here being disrespectful. We engage in a meaningful manner and respectful.
I'm happy to do that because I actually believe that in those that see different from us, if you are not willing to have your thoughts be subjected to criticism, you are not ready to get into the public square. So, because it is in that criticism that we grow, that furniture begins to move to the foreground or to the background or to be checked out. So I have a lot to learn from those that may have different views.
Here's a mischievous question before I let you go. Do you think the truth can come outside of the Adventist church? And would you be willing to follow that truth if it comes outside of the Adventist church?
I have a very confident answer to that. If there's any more truth that I've not seen that is outside there, as soon as I find it, I'll go there.
How will you know that this is the truth?
The truth has a way of appealing. The truth makes sense. Faith is reasonable. It should make sense.
How do I say ubusuku obumnandi in Shona?
Manero akanaka. Maneru akanaka.
Maneru akanaka. Okay, Maneru
There
must
you
be
say
night.
yes,
Akanaka must be emnandi.
Yes, yes. Now you said that like a Shona from Maungo. You said that like a Shona.
I truly love your language, especially when Bishop Mapoga speaks it. He speaks it with so much passion.
Yes, yes. And he has got some deep Shona, you know. He does speak a very, very deep Shona.
Maneru akanaka.
Yes.
See you on the other side. Happy holidays, as the Americans would say.
Same to you, my brother. Yeah, you
God
see,
bless you.
those are holidays that are made within an institution.
Good night, foodies. Have a good
Like,
night. Thank you. Thank you to your family for allowing us to have this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope it will bring something new and something meaningful to someone who hears it.
I hope so too, my brother.
Bye.
Thank
Good night.
Blessings.
And
Bye
thank
bye.
you for joining us on Something Nice with Dinano. If you like this conversation, like, share, and if you haven't subscribed, just subscribe. Good night.